Thursday, March 2nd, 2006. That's the date my guest on this week's episode of the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky posted his very first YouTube video. 15 years later, he's still going strong. Hey everybody, Jon Santiago here, and this week you're going to learn lessons and wisdom from Tim Schmoyer of Video Creators. We talk about his own journey as a YouTuber as well as a variety of other subjects, including the importance of being in front of the right people instead of many people, why you must focus more on what you give rather than what you get as a creator, how he and his wife are navigating this era of content creation and consumption for themselves and their 7 kids, and much more. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky. My guest on this week's episode of the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky is Tim Schmoyer. His creator journey dates back to 2006, a little more than a year after YouTube made its debut. At the time, Tim was dating the woman who would later become his wife, and he wanted to introduce her to his relatives living on the other side of the states. To do so, Tim started filming videos and posting them on YouTube, and over time, he built an audience that reached more than just his family. Now, fast forward to 2013, and Tim founded Videocreators.com, an online community for YouTube creators and entrepreneurs and brand professionals. Video Creators has developed YouTube strategies for both up-and-coming creators as well as renowned brands, including Disney, HBO, Budweiser, eBay, and Warner Brothers, just to name a few. And to date, Tim and his team have helped their clients organically achieve over 14 billion views and 61 million subscribers. And it's my pleasure to speak with Tim on this episode of the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky. Tim, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So I want to start with you just at the beginning, man. Like when I was doing my research on your whole YouTube journey, it amazed me that you started way back in 2006, and I like to look into the archives of like creators' very first videos, and I noticed that the very first video that you and your now wife Dana had posted was posted in like March of 2006, and this is like a year, a little bit like a year after YouTube began.
Well, it was a little less because YouTube started in September 2005. Is that right? September, I think. So it was a little less than a year after, a few months after. Yeah. Yeah, I was in graduate school and I was blogging at the time because blogging was a new social media thing. It was pre-Facebook days, and I was in graduate school halfway across the country from my family back. I was in Dallas and they were in Philadelphia, and I just wanted to introduce them to this girl I was dating, and I was using my WordPress site the way that most people use Facebook today, where I was just little updates of what I was up to and emailing the links back to my friends and family back home. And I was like, oh, I found YouTube, and it was like watching some content there. And then I thought like, oh, I could just put this, make some videos with her and put them on my blog and on my website. And they don't have to download an MOV file. They can just like back then dial up, and email is like the only way to like transfer those files. So yeah, I put it on I found out like, oh, YouTube, I could embed it on my website and they can just click play and it instantly plays. I was like, what is this wizardry? This is amazing. So we started making little videos together then that now would be known as vlogs, but back then that wasn't a word. It was just being awkward in public with a camera. So we just kept going after that. So yeah, it's been quite a fun ride.
What kept you going? Like, what was it that was there just kind of like a little bit of like that buzz where it's like, oh wow, this is interesting. People are watching, so I'm going to keep making stuff?
No, it was probably the opposite, ironically. It was back then, MySpace was getting a lot of criticism in traditional media, broadcast media, saying that don't use your real name on the internet. People will hunt you down and kill you for some reason. And so when I was publishing these videos that were just meant for our family and friends on YouTube, and then other people started watching, I started getting a little nervous. I'm like, who are these people? How are they finding me? Why do they keep coming back? who is Catlicker72? And why do they keep commenting on my videos? And I was out of concern. I was like, how does this platform work? Why are they watching my videos? And so at that time, YouTube wasn't an industry. It was just people just having fun. There was no money on the platform. There was no partner program yet or anything. And so I started reaching out to other people on the platform, just asking them, how does this platform work? Why are they watching? Why do they keep coming back? And how are they finding me? And people were like, we don't know, Tim, but if you figure it out, let us know, because we're trying to figure out the same thing too. So as a good MMO gamer who was ranked globally in the world at that point, I really love figuring out systems and algorithms where like this much damage in this amount of time with this shield and that weapon and this armor, and like just a lot of fast math happening that boom, out comes victory or defeat. And so that really got me excited when it came to YouTube, when I was like, how, like, is this many views on that type of channel with this type of hook and this type of thumbnail, trying to figure out how this platform worked. But what I really loved about it, the thing that really kept me going, was that at that time, I was a full-time youth and family worker, and I just really loved working with teenagers and their families and parents, and seeing those relationships restored and those families growing. And I was working with about 80 students a week through my full-time job. But on YouTube at that time, my first girlfriend, then wife, as we kept going, as we shared our engagement on YouTube, our wedding, our honeymoon, our first house, first job, all that stuff. We were reaching about 1 million people a month, which was unheard of back in those days. And so people are like, how are you doing this? Like, and I was like, you know what? I really love what I'm doing in my full-time job, because we are reaching people and changing their lives. But 80 kids a week versus 1 million people a month. And we were hearing the same stories, if not more stories, of people's lives are being impacted by the stories my wife and I were telling through our videos, of people saying like, hey, I just got married 2 months ago. We're already struggling in our relationship. I don't know if we're going to make it or not. But then I saw that video of you and your wife talking about how like you're learning to love each other better. I shared that video with my husband. We talked about it, and we just have hope again for our marriage. Thank you so much. And I was like, what? That happened because of that video, and people who didn't like commit suicide. And it was just like blowing my mind. And I told my wife, I was like, if we're serious about reaching people and changing lives, like I think YouTube is the place to do it. Not at that time I was a youth pastor at a church. I'm like, I don't know that we're going to get this type of results inside the church. And so, then YouTube, and this is prior to being bought by Google, they were, growing really fast. And so then I was pretty much at that time the only one talking publicly about how YouTube works. And YouTube ended up hiring me to train and onboard their employees about teaching their employees about how YouTube works. And then one thing led to another. Started doing YouTube strategy for other people. Before long, I'm doing YouTube strategy, 3 different strategy deals for Disney, for the Batman release for eBay, or for Warner Brothers, eBay, Budweiser's, HBO, and even now, like we worked with MTV and Twitch.tv last year, and we're still working with YouTube on different products that they're working on and getting ready to release. And so it's just been a crazy ride. And now, instead of being the person who's doing the influencing, I really like that we get to influence the influencers and equip and train them to reach more people with their messages and change more lives than my wife and I could have ever reached. So collectively, views that we can now take responsibility for through video creators, we're up to 18 billion views on YouTube, and about 80 million subscribers that have been generated through the strategy work that we've done with clients. So it's awesome. It's been a really fun ride, and I love it that it's not just about money, but it's how we use popularity and money and resources and business as tools to reach more people and change their lives. And it's been an amazing journey.
Man, that's incredible. Like, there's so many things that I could unpack there about with just the stuff that you mentioned. I always say this now with like guests, because when I'm listening and I'm trying to formulate questions, I'm trying to take mental notes of what it is that I want to ask about. And so one thing that came to my mind that I did want to touch on was just when you were younger, before YouTube even existed, would you have considered yourself like a very open person, like willing to share his story with others?
No, not really. Um, I would in one-on-one contexts where I would feel safe, probably just like anybody, but to do it publicly about like, here's to talk about our marriage issues and problems. And at that time, that particular video was related to a very public divorce and another YouTube celebrity was going through, and it impacted a lot of people. And so we talked openly. We're still married now, thankfully, almost 15 years now, but 7 kids later. We had 7 kids in 8 years somehow.
Wow, man.
But yeah, so I don't know, I wouldn't put myself in that category, but I guess social media has kind of shifted for me where I don't think about it as they did back then, which back then it was certainly like people were confused about what it was. It was like, is this a platform where we present ourselves like traditional media and broadcast media, or what is this? And we've since have learned that, social media is this new different thing, and it's not about a presentation. It's about having a conversation. Broadcast is like in movies is clearly one to many, and everyone understands that, expects that. But on YouTube and social media, it's supposed to feel like one to one, even though we all know that it's not, but it's supposed to feel that way. And that's, I think, where that is more comfortable for me, the one-on-one. And I think when I think about it that way, it ends up feeling that way for the viewer, which was part of the success.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I had noticed from like going back into the archives as well, is like you very much have approached YouTube as just focusing on just the single audience member, right? Like I think so many people these days are, especially like if they're starting on their creator journey, or if they're like middle of the way through, they're like, how can I become Mr. Beast with like 50 million subscribers? But like it's almost better. It's better, I would say, and I'm sure you might agree with this too, to kind of think about like the individual person, like who's just talking to one-on-one.
Yeah. And for a lot of people, they think that their goal is to be in front of as many people as possible. But really, if you have a more business mindset around your channel, a mindset that will make it more financially sustainable in the long run, then it's not as important that you're in front of as many people as possible. It's important that you're in front of the right people. It's better to be in front of 10 of the right people than like 100,000 of the wrong people. Because especially if you have a product or you have a service, or you're developing like a Patreon page or YouTube members or whatever the case may be, you want those people to make a transaction with you of some kind. You need the right people. And as we consistently see over and over and over again, that the people who make the most money and the most successful on YouTube from that standpoint are not always, actually are the bigger channels are more the exception, that who make like I have a friend of mine, I was actually talking with her earlier today. She has 1.6 million subscribers and makes like $800 a month right off of AdSense. So people think that bigger channels make more money, but it's not true. It's more about the business model. But I think I'm off track from what you actually asked. Sorry.
It's okay.
I just went way off in left field. You're like, whoa, Tim. Okay, that's all right. Bring it back.
No,
now.
Man. No, I love it, man. This is where I love podcasts. I love that we launched this podcast because I love like the conversations to kind of just meander into different spaces that we don't even really intend to go, but they could be really good spaces, right? And so one thing you bring up too, and we had talked about this like a little bit before we started recording, is we have a mutual connection. You're friends with Owen Hemzath. Owen Hemzath is somebody who has appeared on this podcast, and I spoke to Owen on one of the early episodes of this podcast about being a smaller YouTuber and how he's kind of championing that cause, because even Owen himself, his YouTube channel has about 60,000 subscribers, but he's doing really well. Like he's got enough people, not necessarily like a massive enough people, but enough people. Yeah. The right people to work with and help them in their own journeys as they try to become creators themselves.
Yeah, yeah, that's mostly true if you got something you want to sell. Now, if your business model is like a media company model where you're basically selling your audience's eyeballs to advertisers, then having the most eyeballs makes this more sense. But even then, you can command a higher fee for sponsorships and for brand deals if you have a specific targeted audience as opposed to just a really large broad audience. So because most of the time these advertisers want to be like, they know who they're targeting and who they're going after and who their customers are. And so if your channel is like just squarely just nailing that first time mom audience, for example, and let's say you have 100,000 of those, that might be more valuable than 1 million of just like generic, like some mom, some dad, some kids, some adult, like, and it's just like, I don't really, just a hodgepodge like that. If there's a brand like P&G who's trying to sell diapers to, like, they're going to come and work with you all day, every day over the 1 million subscriber channel who's just got a generic audience. So it's almost always beneficial to focus on the right people and not just the most people if you have a business mindset. If you just want the internet to stroke your ego and make you feel more popular, then go after the most people. But even then, it's not going to be sustainable long term, because if you're reaching like a really broad general audience, you're just trying to get as many people as possible, it's usually that community that doesn't stay solid for a long time because there's not enough core beliefs and shared beliefs that tie them together and make it like, I really just need to keep watching everything that this person does. So the brand ends up being too broad and then attracting like nobody. So there's a lot more to unpack there, but yeah, it's kind of how we think about being in front of the right people and not just as many people as possible.
I also think about this too, Tim, in the sense of like, when you have so many people who know who you are, I mean, there's a level of like dealing with fame there that I wouldn't want to deal with that. Like, I wouldn't want, like I mentioned Mr. Beast earlier, I wouldn't want to have like however many millions of subscribers that he has, because he could probably be walking down the street and people will notice him and they might try to approach him and stuff like that. Like, I kind of like the idea of having a little bit of relative anonymity.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I don't really want that either. I like living here in Cincinnati, Ohio area, where it's not LA, it's not San Diego, San Francisco, where all these tech companies are who know a lot more about this stuff. Here, I can tell someone like they're like, "What do you do for a living?" I'm like, "Oh, I just do video marketing strategy for clients on YouTube." They're like, "Oh." That's all they know to ask. They don't even know what to ask after that. They're just like, I don't even know what to say. Haven't heard that one before. You're not like a CPA or something. So I like it. It just kind of stops the conversation and we can move on to more important things.
Have you had moments like that though, Tim? Like with you and your family, because your family vlogs, obviously now that your original channel has like transitioned to more of a family vlogging channel. Do you have people like, what has that been like when people have come up and say, "Hey, I love watching you on YouTube"?
Yeah, we don't do much on that channel anymore. And it's kind of unfortunate that a lot of the earlier videos are now gone, because back then people didn't think twice about using copyrighted music in the videos, and there was no system to detect it. It was just YouTube grew because of copyrighted material. So a lot of those videos have since been removed, unfortunately, and are down. And that channel is no longer very active for us. So most of the recognition comes from video creators, and that normally happens at conferences, at events, VidCon, and it's, a little bit hard to walk anywhere for longer than 2 minutes without getting stopped. And I don't mind it. At first it was really weird, but I've been doing this now for over a decade. And so for me personally, I actually appreciate it, not in the sense of like, oh, you're making me feel good about myself, but it's an opportunity for me to put faces to usernames on YouTube and commenters on YouTube. And it reminds me that every view count on YouTube represents an actual person who's giving me an opportunity to speak into their life, to say something. They're giving me their attention, which is the most valuable commodity there is. And and so for me, it's like, it's an opportunity for me to like slow down and be like, oh my gosh, this is like a real person who's like watching these videos, and I can put a name and a story and a personal impact. And because it's about reaching people and changing lives for me, hearing those stories are like, just really invigorates me. So it's not weird anymore, but I don't really get it too much outside of those conference spaces and things.
Is it overwhelming at all still? Or not as much?
As an introvert, yeah. Yeah, I need, it's probably when I'm at those events, probably a few times a day, I need to just go to a space where I'm alone or back to my hotel room or something and just like just decompress, and let my jaw relax from like smiling and being happy to meet people all day, and just let my face relax and just lay on my bed, close my eyes, because by that time they feel like, as an introvert, I burn through my word quota for the month, like in 2 days at those events. So it's more due to that and personality than it is to the fact that I'm tired of meeting people. It's not that. It's just like my personality just I can only take so much.
I see. Were there any people who particularly influenced you to think this way in terms of seeing, the audience on a one-to-one level?
Anyone? Maybe. I think part of it is just due to the way that I'm wired. I think part of it is due to some of the early creators I started watching who do this fairly well, which were Philip DeFranco back in the early days, Shay Carl back in those early days, and the Vlog Brothers, and some of those types of creators back then did a really good job, and still today do a good job at doing that one-to-one vibe in their content, and it's less of a presentation, more of a conversation. And so that probably influenced that perspective as well, especially then when I I don't know if you remember this, it was, how many years ago was this? Maybe 7 years ago? I don't remember, but YouTube made $100 million investment into, supporting creators. And they gave most of it to celebrities, like Hollywood celebrities and things, but they did give some of it to the homegrown YouTube creators. Like that's how Hank Green and John Green started Crash Course and SciShow. That's how when Philip DeFranco started the what's the channel that had the 4 news people on it? I'm drawing a blank. But so some of those, the outcome of that is that the creators or the traditional media celebrities who are getting paid to come to YouTube, almost all of their channels fell flat and didn't really go anywhere. And I actually remember I was out at Universal Studios in Hollywood on set with Jillian Michaels. I don't know if she's from The Biggest Loser, if you remember her. She got part of this grant money to do this. And so her producer is the former producer of, at that time, of Good Morning America, professional television set studio in Universal Studios, filming this content for YouTube. And I remember being on set, and the problem was like she could attract 4 million people instantly on television, but only 2,500 people on a YouTube video. Like she was doing one video every weekday, and the videos were kind of just averaging at like 2,500 views. And I was trying to figure out why, and it kind of clicked for me on set when she's there. She's going, "Hey guys, I had an awesome day. You need to know all about it. Coming up right after this." And I was like, "Whoa, that is all wrong." As opposed to, "Hey guys, how you doing? Oh, it's so good to see you again, man. I had an awesome day today. Like, did you like Sarah? You commented yesterday. This comment made my day. Thank you so much. Let me right." It's like the same content, but very different presentation, conversation versus presentation. And when I saw that on set, I was like, oh, this is why, and I don't want to mention names, but like a lot of the big celebrities were just not doing well, and why the homegrown YouTube creators actually took that budget that YouTube gave them and just grew it into very sustainable channels that are still growing and going on today. And most of the other celebrities just fell flat. So, and aren't doing it anymore. Some of them still are, but even those aren't doing it very successfully. So there are some anomalies with the right exceptions to the rule that weren't part of that program. Like Will Smith, for example, he gets it, you know, and he does a really good job. But for the most part, it was those types of experiences and people, and part of my own wiring has just made me feel like I got excited about this because I felt like I was impacting one person's life. I was impacting someone who sends me a video and says, Tim, my dad died. I'm dyslexic. I can't read, and I'm on disability, and don't feel like I'm contributing any value to the world, and just was about to kill myself and end my life. But I made a video about what was it, Call of Duty, back when Call of Duty was a really big thing. And I wasn't getting views on it, so I started watching your channel because I'm dyslexic and can't read. Your videos were giving me information I really needed in a format that was really easy for me to understand. And my channel started growing as a result. And because of the growth, I've been forced to learn how to read and write better to reply to my commenters. I'm now making enough money off my channel that I'm off of disability, and I feel like I have a community of people around me again. And I feel like I'm contributing value to the society and to the world now through this content. And he literally said to me, he's like, Tim, I want you to know that there's still one person who's still alive on this planet and didn't take their life because of a process you had a big part in. And I'm like, that's like, oh my God, like talk about reaching people and changing lives. They could reach people and saving lives maybe, but that's when I'm like, this is really about one-to-one. Like, this is about reaching people and not just like becoming popular and being the biggest, baddest channel, the most viewers or something to stroke my own ego. It's and I have lots of those stories I could tell, and whenever I do, I just get like reinvigorated about this is why I do this and this is why this matters.
That's really fascinating, man, and really moving and touching as well. Like, for you to talk about that, it makes me think about like when people, you know, in general, not just in like content creation, right? Like, people are always struggling to find meaning in their lives. Like, what am I here on earth to do? What are we doing? And it really sounds like to me that one of the things that keeps you going is knowing that this is not just about serving yourself. This is about serving other people. Like, you're doing something that is like bigger than yourself, which it helps you find that motivation.
Yeah, we just finished up with a client not too long ago who is a professional musician. And then when COVID hit, all their concerts got canceled. And they had no income, and streaming doesn't really pay a whole lot. And so they had a little YouTube channel. They started working on it and started working with us on that. And at first they tried all the normal things that they were hearing people say on YouTube, like, you got to publish more often, publish more frequently, you'll get more ad revenue. And so they started publishing daily, and that didn't actually move the needle at all, you know. And they started, they launched a Patreon, and they did all these things. And then they finally, at the end of the rope, were like, Tim, like, we don't really have enough money to keep going. But like, we think you can help us. And that's a lot of pressure, you know, for me to be able to take that money and be like, yes, we can help you, and we're going to do this, you know, like, pound it, let's do it, you know. And through about 2 months working together, they launched the product and to their audience and made more money in 4 days than they made the entire year before. And it totally eclipsed their annual salary that they were making prior to that. And I love it because it's not just about a success story of someone made more money. It's like, they really believe in what they're doing, and they had a small but dedicated, loyal following of people who really loved their music and what they were all about. And they just hadn't figured out how to capture value. So with the right business model around it, they were able to turn that around and actually get the value that their content and their community was worth. And especially when their position, they weren't really in a position to be able to just pick up another job in the middle of COVID. So like that changed not only their life, but also what they did actually impacted their audience's life. Because, well, I don't know how far you want me to go in this story. I got lots of stories. I'll keep telling them.
Keep going.
But,
keep going, Tim. Honestly, just keep going.
Okay. So, the way I know it impacted I do think it's important for creators to make a lot of money. Like this guy, I think it's important to make a lot of money, but not because money is the goal. I think if money is the goal, I believe it could actually ruin your life. But money is an amazing tool that you can use to reach more people and change their life. So when you think of it as a tool, it's like the more of these you have, the more impact and influence that you get to have over providing jobs for people, for putting votes with your dollars behind things that are important to you and things like that. But also because I heard there's a good book that I read called Thou Shalt Prosper. It's written by a Jewish rabbi, Daniel Lapin is his name. And basically what he's doing there, I hope that doesn't offend anybody, but this is literally what the book is about. He says, why does the Jewish population account for 2% of our population, but they control 80% of our assets? What do they understand about business that makes them like really proliferant? Is that the right word? I don't know, really good at it.
Prolific, I think.
And prolific, yeah. Like they're just, yeah. Why do they just dominate in business? And it was a really good book. But one of the things that he said in there that was really changing for me, since I think about money and business, he's like, think about money not, as he said, think of them as certificates of appreciation. And so when someone gives you a certificate of appreciation, they're saying what you are giving me is valuable to me. It's actually valuable enough to say, I appreciate this so much, I'm going to give you these amount of certificates. And so as I started thinking about it that way, I'm like, oh, the more certificates of appreciation I get, that's like maybe a decent way of measuring how much value I'm contributing to other people and to their lives. If they're going to pay me, let's say, I'm going to make up numbers, say they're going to pay me thousands of dollars to work with them and develop a stronger business model around their channel. They'll pay me because they're like, Tim, we appreciate this so much. This is how much this is valuable to us. And so I think going back to my original statement, which is I think like this channel who made more money than they ever made the year before as touring as professional musicians, that it was because they finally had a good way of letting their audience say that we appreciate you. This is valuable to me. And they could now finally measure the value that they were providing in terms of actual like data and spreadsheets. It's just that most creators don't, know the value that they're actually providing. And because there's a lot more value than I'm just teaching you something. There's a relational value that can be built. There's a motivational value, like a lot of emotional. There's a lot of more human connection stuff than just information intellectual stuff, which is like a lot of the gaming community and blogging community, a lot of that is built on that social value. So one, they don't know the value that they're actually delivering, and then they don't know what value to actually capture. But if they knew that value, like I'm delivering 1x this value through my channel, then here's how you can consume that same value, but 10x that value in a format you're willing to pay for. That's an easy transaction for people who are consuming it for free already, to be like, oh, I've already getting here. It's awesome. I can get 10x the same value over here. Like, boom, I'm in. And it's a great way to measure the impact and the value you're providing. So again, another tangent there, but there you go.
No, honestly, fantastic, man. That was awesome. Like just to hear that whole story about those musicians that you work with. And it called to mind for me a question that I have about just when you work with some of these creators, about there's a lot of focus on like little tactics, right? Like, let me get like, how do I like, what kind of words should I be using in my my title and description?
You're hitting a
and Tim, honestly, even
you're gonna put me on a soapbox.
Tim, even honestly, I'm gonna be completely honest here. When I was starting this podcast, I started to focus. I was focusing on a lot of those questions, trying to ask some of the creators that, but again, referring back to our mutual friend, Owen Hemsett, he kind of snapped me out of it, and he had got on his soapbox as well and said like, look, he's like, don't even worry about like these things, man. Like, stop thinking about these things. Like, remember that you're dealing with people. Like, that was the main takeaway there. So I'm going to stop with what I'm saying here and kind of let you get on your soapbox. And I know that you have something to say about this.
If you already have the soapbox speech, I'll let Owen do it because I'm sure he does a fantastic job at it. I kind of would like to hear it, actually. No, but yeah, people, they creators, I'm just going to say it. They get so emotionally connected to their work that, and sometimes the way they've been raised and brought up where they've been like, everyone gets a trophy at the end, the sports league, and your work is always good. Good job, Johnny. You did a really good, amazing job. And then they come to YouTube and they publish a video and they're like, where's my participation trophy? Like, this work is really good. And it doesn't work that way on YouTube. And so then the thing they go to in order to figure out like, well, the content must be good. It must be YouTube's fault that this isn't performing very well. So what are the technical things I'm missing? I just had to learn the right buttons or the right things to press. And that's not it at all. It's really like, just to be hard truth is just like, the content's just not good enough yet. If it was good enough and more people were resonating with it and it was in getting the appropriate amount of engagement and things, like YouTube search and discovery systems are designed to surface the right video to the right person at the right time. And they are trying to surface good content. And if your video is not being surfaced, it's not usually, in fact, in over a decade of doing this and working with literally thousands of creators, all the way from 10 million plus subscriber channels down to brand new ones, I think I've only seen one channel that was held back for technical reasons. And that channel was a unique case because they were actually providing medical advice, which YouTube takes very seriously. And even to the creator's own admission, they were creeping into conspiracy theory stuff around medical advice, trying to gain views. And then their channel got like just flatlined, and they came to me like, what happened? I'm like, well, this is what happened. There's a technical issue. You're being held back. And I verified that with some people at YouTube, and they said yes. So that's the only exception I've seen to it. And I think that's a clear one to all of us of like why that would have happened. So if you're not doing conspiracy theories around medical advice, then like the technical stuff is not important. In fact, YouTube says that anything that the creator has to do that the viewer doesn't care about in order to make that video grow, YouTube has that classified as a bug in their system. That's why tags don't matter, because the viewer doesn't care about your tags. And so performance on YouTube shouldn't be left up to the people who figure out how to click the right buttons and enter the right keywords. Success on YouTube should be who's just making the best content that's resonating with people the most. And so that's why YouTube, the signals they look at for ranking is they're almost 100%. They revolve around viewer signals, which would be how does the viewer react and respond to this content? Is it like watch time? That's how much time does the person spend watching the video? It's click-through rate. Does this entice them to even want to watch it in the first place? It's session time. Like after someone's watching this video, how long do they spend on YouTube as a result of watching this video? It's audience retention. Like how well does this video hold someone's attention? And now, especially this year and last year, an increasingly important metric is viewer satisfaction, which is, okay, it held their attention and they engaged with it, but how did it make someone feel? Did it make them feel like they're likely to come back to YouTube in another day or 2 days? Or are they just going to feel a little icky about this viewing session and not come back to YouTube for another week from now? And they're collecting every day millions of these viewer satisfaction surveys that they are giving them tons of amazing data and how the content is actually impacting people on an emotional level. So the technical stuff is really an old way of thinking about how do I grow a YouTube channel? And it's kind of even today based on my content's good enough. I think it's awesome and it's still not working. So it just must be YouTube's fault. Let me figure out how to hit the right buttons and insert the right amount of coins and get out what I want of YouTube. And that's not the problem. And that's why it's easy for some people, friends of mine even, unfortunately, to go years publishing regular, consistent content and not really getting much traction on their channel, because it's not about how often you publish. It's about how you make someone feel about your content. And there's channels that will grow, like Mark Rober, grow to over 10 million subscribers doing one video a month, every 6 weeks. But it was really good, high quality material that told a really good story, engaged people on a really deep level, caused them to watch more, as opposed to some people are just churning out content and the channel's just kind of flat and they're wondering what's going on. So there's a lot in there, but Owen's right. So yes, whatever Owen said, it sounds like he was spot on.
Yeah, he's much like you. He had a very eloquent diatribe about this whole subject of worrying about these little small technical tactics and whatnot. And again, as I said, it just kind of snapped me into thinking, I gotta think about the way I'm asking these questions a little bit differently, and I'm preparing for some of these podcast interviews. And so that's that there. Tim, I also wanted to ask you about going back to what you had said in regards to building relationships with people at YouTube, and then building these relationships with brands, and then even getting a chance to work with celebrities. Like where did that start? How did those relationships begin? Was it just kind of like a cold email or a cold message from like someone on YouTube to your YouTube account and asking you to like come and help them?
At the beginning, it was probably being in the right place at the right time, where there weren't, like, this YouTube online video wasn't really an industry yet. No one knew how, like, even if YouTube wouldn't survive all the lawsuits before Google bought them. So it was mostly back then, there weren't, like, if you were looking for how to grow a YouTube channel, it was like, really, I was the only option, really. There was a few other people kind of sharing ideas and stuff like you still have today, but in terms of like a dedicated brand person who's just studying this and sharing stuff, I was kind of the only one doing it. The very beginning, like when I started doing the onboarding for YouTube employees, or being a part of that process, I wasn't doing their onboarding, I should clarify. I was basically like, YouTube is so siloed. They have the people who just knew their part, but didn't know how the whole platform overall looked like and what their role would, like if this change here, how it impact something else. YouTube has since done a much better job internally at doing that, especially since Google bought them. But yeah, so it started early of just like being around the people who are trying to figure it out, and we kind of like just became attracted to each other. And some of those people are still in the space today. Most of them aren't. And then after that, I think when I was really trying to push Videocraft, when I first launched it, and I had 6 months to turn it into my full-time gig and wrap a good business model around that, I was really intense on introducing myself to as many people as possible in the space. And because I was no longer just floating on the coattails of someone else's brand, I was like making my own from scratch. And so I remember my channel was new, and blogging was a lot more about video, was more popular than making videos about video back then. And so there were a lot of people writing about it, and I would reach out to all of those people and I would introduce myself, and then we'd be at a conference or event. I remember one VidCon, the first VidCon was like 2013. I shot over 30 or 40 interviews in like one weekend there. Wow. And it was all with industry leaders and people, because it was a little bit different, like to shoot an email and be like, hey, just so in case you don't know who I am, this is me, check out my channel, as opposed to, I'm going to be at VidCon, I see you're on the speaking list there, I would love to interview you about your topic. I know my audience would really like it, and I'd love to share your thoughts with my audience. Like, can we take a few minutes to do an interview? And everyone says yes to that, because it's like, it's not an ask, it's like a give. I want to lend my voice to your message and give to you. And then I would shoot the video, and it would be good information for my audience. And then those people, most of the time, would be like, wow, I'm on camera, it looks good, because they're used to writing. They would then write an article about my video and embed it, and then introduce. So I did that a lot in the beginning. But the relationships now that I have today are primarily due to word of mouth and like, hey, I talked to someone said I really need to reach out to you. Like, you're the person who could help me. Or it's, I've been watching your videos, someone at YouTube, like I've been watching your videos for a while and just wanted to reach out. Some of those employees that do that, those are always fun, encouraging. So, yeah. So I don't know. Does that answer the question? There's a little bit of a lot of different things.
No, it does. I mean, it's
just kind of being present and available to people and having like a giving mentality rather than like, hey, yes, use me for your thing. It was more like, how can I contribute and help you with what you're doing? And so I think it's not a ask and you'll receive. I think it's a give and you'll receive.
Yes, I totally agree with
you.
That's
tweetable right there.
Hey, that's a bar, man. That's a bar. Go ahead and we'll excerpt that, and you could tweet it out. We'll just retweet you. But I was gonna say though, like I totally agree with you in that mindset, and I think a lot of people, generally speaking, it's hard for us to sell. Like selling is because it's so associated with like the used car salesman who's trying to like suck value out of you and just get this like beat up junker off of their lot. But when you actually think about what it is that you have to offer to somebody and just thinking in terms of like, hey, like this is how I can help you and I want to try and help you. I'm not really thinking so much about myself. It's not I'm sucking all the value out of this ask. Then right. You find that it's just much more comfortable. You find yourself being much more comfortable reaching out to people, like even for example, like reaching out to you and getting and hearing back from your executive assistant, Stephanie, right? Like even when I sent that pitch, I'm like, this guy's really big. I don't even know if he's going to want to like come on our podcast, but I'm just going to send this email. We're going to present, what it is that, we're trying to do and what we can offer as well. And if he says no, he says no. If he says yes, wow, that's amazing. Like I'm amazed that you're on this podcast.
I didn't say no or yes. Stephanie makes all those choices for me, and I just show up whatever she puts on my calendar. So that was all her. So you can thank her for that. I mean, I'm glad to be here, obviously, but yeah, she's the gatekeeper to my calendar and schedule. So and I trust her with it, and she does a good job.
Well, I will definitely be sending Stephanie a follow-up thank you email for letting you come on the podcast, because this has already been like such a interesting and entertaining conversation and enlightening as well, as far as like so many different facets. But Tim, I also want to go down the direction of you personally creating content. I know, as you mentioned earlier, you're a little bit moving away from that, but there are occasions where you're still posting some stuff up. And I saw, your wife's most recent vlog, your family vlog, about having your kids and the whole family give up screen time for a year. And I thought that was so incredible. That was amazing because, these days we're so attached to these devices, to our phones and to our laptops and to our iPads. And I'm really curious just about what it's been like for you as a creator, but also as a father, raising kids in this era of content consumption and content creation.
Yeah, it's a interesting balance because I want them to understand how media works, because they're going to need to know that as they grow up and just to be a fully contributing member of society. But on the other hand, so my wife and I, we have 7 kids in 8 years. And when you have 7 kids in 8 years, it's like, think of it, if I put this in business language, maybe I'll make it a little more understandable. If you have explosive growth in your business, a lot of systems break and a lot of things go wrong, but that doesn't mean that you should like put the business on hold and be like, you know what, we should just stay like $1 million company because we can only handle $1 million. And so instead you're motivated to try to figure things out and improve the systems. And so when you have 7 kids in 8 years, that's like explosive growth for a family. Yeah. Right? And what maybe if you have 1 or 2 systems in place that that like discipline systems, for example, that work when you have 1 or 2 kids, it doesn't work when you have 7 kids. If you can tolerate a little bit of whining and disobedience from like, if you have 1 or 2 kids, you can't tolerate a little bit of whining and disobedience when you have 7 kids. It's just not an environment anyone wants to live in. So in order to make that type of explosive family growth actually be a good space for us, we were coming to the end of our rope, because my wife and I, as far as we knew, we were doing everything that we knew in terms of like for discipline for our kids and correction and building relationships and all the stuff you would hope a family does. And it wasn't working. We were still getting these, I'm bored, or so, like all the bickering and fighting and complaining and the, I don't know what to do with myself and just attitude and general problems overall. And it was getting to the point where my wife was like, we don't enjoy our family. So I reached out to a friend of mine who does a lot of clinical research on child development for the Child Protection Services Agency in the state of Ohio. And he's a dad, has a lot of kids like I do. And I'm like, how do you do this? And he's like, Tim, how much screen time do your kids get? And I lied, actually. I told him, like, yeah, about a half hour a day. It's probably it's closer, probably like 2 hours a day. And he's like, well, there's your problem. I'm like, I lied. I said half hour. That's a problem. And I was like, I thought I was doing pretty good. And he's like, and he started explaining to me the science and what the research is showing about screen time impact on kids, which is it literally makes that's why the kids, or even us as adults, we go completely still on when we watch television, because the whole the body just shuts down, and even the brain can get so lazy that it just takes in whatever's being fed, and it doesn't have to work hard to be entertained. And when you do that especially with children, adults are a lot more resilient, but with children, they start getting, their brain doesn't actually develop the neural pathways it needs in order to have like problem solving skills. Problems such as, I'm bored, what do I do with myself? They don't know how to solve that problem. The only way they know how to solve that is to turn the screen back on. And as a dad who hopes that that my kids will one day be good employees or business owners, like, you got to learn how to solve problems. Like, that's a part of life. And he's like, the attitudes and the issues are just coming from the fact that their brains are just, they're not developing the neural pathways they need to develop problem solving skills and how to like actually be entertained. So he said the research, and it actually, even like literally CAT scans show that if the kid has too much screen time, it doesn't even develop the right membranes that separate the right and left hemispheres of the brain. Like the brain just doesn't grow. So he said that detox usually takes about a year. He said you could maybe do it less if you wanted to, but he recommended going 1 year with no screen time, and in order to fully detox. And I was like, we were at the end of our rope, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna take your advice. Like, we're gonna do this. We need a better home. And so we told our kids, that's the video you watched of us telling them like no screen time for a year. They took it fairly well. I don't know if they actually believed us or not. So, but we stuck with it. And the first week, 2 weeks actually, was horrible. Like, they were beside themselves. It was like taking the crack from the crack addict. I think maybe, I don't know, but it was even harder for my wife, who lost the only fallback that she knew at that point, which was turn on the screen, get them out of my hair, and let me just be able to get done the thing I need to get done. And it was really, really tough. But we knew that the guy told us we would be facing that. So we pushed through for about 2 weeks. It got better after 2 weeks, and by about 6 weeks in, the kids were no longer saying I'm bored. They were kind of entertaining themselves. And now we're at a point a year later where the fighting, the bickering, the complaining, the issues, the attitudes are almost gone. They're still human. They're still kids, right? So those things still pop up. But we experience very little of those things now. And they're entertained themselves. They just devour books. which also actually became a problem because we're like, okay, you're still just laying around, like, so we had to set a limit on books actually too, which we didn't expect, but this guy recommended doing that. So, but yeah, they were cranking through library books. My 8-year-old read the entire Hardy Boys series, like all of them, like whatever 70 some of them there are, and fell in love with that series. So it was it's been really, really good. And so now we have reintroduced screen time, but it's not a get out of my hair thing. It's a relational family building activity. And we will watch one movie every other week, every other Saturday. And it's a family building time. Like we watch it together. We pick a movie everyone wants to watch. And then we watch it and we turn it off. And even at the end of it, the kids are, even now, they're still kind of like, I don't really like the way I feel after we turn it off. And we all kind of agree. And then we get up and we go play a board game or something together and try to get it out of our system. So, it's been very transformative for our family, and I would absolutely do it again. And it wasn't easy, but the things that are worth doing in life are typically the things that are the hardest things to do. And so I tell my kids, is like, if you're faced with a decision, you're not really sure what to do, pick the hardest option. That's usually the right one. And that is what we definitely leaned into with this, and the benefits. I mean, I could keep going on and on and on, but it has really transformed our family. And now we all like each other again. So,
well, that's
and
important.
you just have to say no to screens. Yeah.
That's important with 9 people in a single household, right? Like just being able to get along with each other under the same roof. And what you're talking about, it kind of reminds me of like personally, like I was not in good shape a couple of years ago, and I started actually making a commitment to exercising and not eating as bad. Because now I'm in my early 30s. I think when you're in your 20s, you can just get away with consuming everything like a garbage disposal, to be honest. But it's like
I'm feeling it. I'm 40.
Yeah, it's like now when I eat something sweet and I binge on it, I feel like crap. I don't like it. And then that's what I'm saying. It sounds like that similar experience with just when you're consuming too much screen time or having too much screen time. Now it's just like, wait, this feels like way too much.
Yeah, it's been really, really good for us. I still haven't quite figured out how to handle I think my kids, they need to learn how to use social media, and they need to learn how to use screens and the internet, and they know how to check out libraries on the library website and things like that. But at some point they're going to need better skills. And before we took our 1 year of screen time off, they were using our family GoPro to just make fun little videos and publishing that to a little channel that they had. And so that was a good creative outlet for them to create and edit those. They edited themselves on iMovie. My wife and I would watch it and approve it first of all, before they published it, make sure there was anything inappropriate or something in it. But so I think we're going to get back into doing that again with them and letting them do that kind of a creative stuff. But when they're solving problems and making things and not just passively just zoning out in front of a screen. But we haven't started that yet. I'm not sure at what point we will, but probably sometime soon here as we get into summer and the kids are going to be out more and having more things they probably want to film. So we'll see.
Yeah. That was amazing to me when I, watching that video and just you asking them, what did you guys do today? And they were just excited to go outside. I don't know many kids these days who want to just go outside. They just want to play around with the phone or get on an iPad. I don't have kids yet at this stage in life, but these are things that I think about. Even though I'm not, I'm not married, I don't have kids. I just don't, I just want to learn the best ways to deal with this new environment that we're living in. And that kind of brings me to one of my last questions that I want to ask you here is just, how do you decide what to make public and what to keep private about your family life, right? Because again, you have these 7 kids and, they're they're like, also kind of like the star of some of this content that you're making. And so I imagine that there's like hard conversations that you and your wife wrestle with in terms of how to figure out what content to create about your family.
Yeah, we don't really create much content about our family anymore, but when we were more active with that, the stories mostly revolved around my wife. And so the kids were more like supporting characters.
Mm-hmm.
And it was more her telling her stories and her struggles of being a mom and having 7 children in 8 years and all those types of things. So our target audience were not other kids with that channel. Our target audience were other moms who maybe had 2 or 3 kids and were like, I'm overwhelmed with 2 or 3. How are you doing it with 7? And so that was the audience we're going after. So, but even then it's like, my wife's like, should I share this story? And so we usually kind of talk about it and more of on a gut level. One is like, would this embarrass our children when they're older? Then no, we don't share it. We never show them, because if you put something online, it's out there forever. You can't really take it back. And so even if you delete it, someone else could have downloaded it or something. So we know that we're actually crafting our kids' digital futures in terms of like, will their future employers come back and look at some of this stuff about them? So we be very careful about what we put out there. If there's like we won't show discipline issues. We won't show attitude problems. We'll talk about it and just kind of say it happened instead. So nothing embarrassing for them in the future. And then even for us, we tend not to talk about marital issues and things like that in the moment, just because while you're in the middle of it, it's a little raw and it's good for getting attention, but it's not really good for helping people. And what we would rather do is wait till we're a little bit behind it. It can look back on it a little bit more objectively and be like, oh, okay, this is what was going on. And here's what we learned from it. Now we have something helpful we think we can share. And again, it's not as amazing for views because the drama isn't as high, but we feel like if for us, the goal isn't lots of views. The goal is to serve the right people. And those are the people who are looking for actual help that's been proven, and not just someone who's in the middle of something and thinking like, here's what I'll do. And so, yeah, we usually just we very rarely posted about something in the moment, even pregnancies, births, deliveries, stuff, marital stuff. Like my wife and I went through a pretty rough patch about 6 months ago, and we're probably ready to start talking about that now publicly, but you can't talk about that publicly while you're in the middle of it, because you just end up saying things that aren't true or you don't know are true. It's just too confusing during it. So I think if there's a principle there, it's don't publish it right away. Wait and ask the main question, will this help someone, a viewer? And how do we do it in a way that actually helps them without needing to embarrass anyone or share more information that's necessary?
Yeah, it's important to give.
I don't know. We haven't really put real clear rules to it, but that's kind of the process we follow.
Well, it's just important to let those kinds of tense moments like breathe for a second and kind of, get to a point where you're a little bit more rational, you're a little bit more logical, your tempers aren't as flared. And I mean, it's so easy these days, right? Just because with the click of a button, you can put somebody else on blast easily. Like the friction is gone to do that. And so understanding like the power that is in there and understanding like how to wield it is just something I think like not only like people who are creating and building big audiences have to think about, but it's also just like normal people who are just posting stuff online on Instagram for their friends or on Facebook or elsewhere. So Tim, I want to wrap up here with the final question about dealing with burnout. I know that you had kind of taken a little bit of a hiatus on the Video Creators channel, and you did a great video about this. And I wonder what advice would you give to creators who feel like so overwhelmed with like, God, I have to make stuff all the time. I have to keep delivering to the audience. Otherwise, like my videos just aren't going to pop off anymore. What pieces of advice would you give to people related to this subject?
You know, I think since my own experience happened with it, for anyone who's not familiar, I basically had a physical breakdown, stress-induced breakdown in the middle of the night, had excruciating pain in my stomach, and was about to go to the hospital before it thankfully subsided. And the doctor later and a therapist, counselor person was like, yeah, it sounds like it was stress-induced, and I need to change some things about my lifestyle and amount of sleep I get and how hard I work and things like that. Before that happened, my advice would have been like, yeah, just have good boundaries and don't overwork and stuff, whatever, right? But post that, I think I knew all that stuff before it happened. And it was always like, oh, I don't feel stressed. Like, oh, that happens to other people. It doesn't happen to me. And now I'm kind of like, I don't think there's really a way around it. Like you can try to take advice, but you probably, it's like one of those things like, you know, is going to happen, but you don't think it'll happen to you. Or you think like, I've got it all under control until you don't. And you just never see that moment coming. And then it hits you like a bus. And then you're like, oh, that's what I'm missing. So I think my advice now is like, it'll come. And unfortunately for some friends of mine, since posting that video, they reached out and be like, yeah, it happened to me, but I ended up in the hospital for 2 weeks and glad that wasn't happening to you. So, I mean, there are some really real financial and physical consequences for it. But I think the people who need the advice don't usually, like me, listen to the advice because they already assume like that's not me. And if you think that that's not me, that's not going to happen to me, then it's going to happen to you. So it's unfortunate the people who need the advice are usually the people who discount the advice for that particular issue. So yeah, my advice is like still the same, I suppose, at the end of the day, but the people who need the advice are probably the people who won't take it. Like me. That's what happened to me. You know?
Well, even there, like what you're saying, I think just understanding and accepting that it's gonna come, like that you are gonna get burnt out, like you're gonna have like moments in your life where you're just down, and understanding that I think can help a lot in terms of not necessarily preventing it from happening, but maybe like mitigating how long you, like if you get depressed or something like that, how long you deal with a depression or whatnot. Obviously physical ailments are a lot more challenging to deal with, but I don't know. That's just something that came to mind, and I know it's personally worked for me.
I think the issue is that, and I've been since learning this about myself since going through therapy after that happened and working with a counselor and things, that there's underlying beliefs that we hold about ourselves that make us discount that type of advice. Like, oh no, my audience needs me. And we don't say these things out loud to ourselves, and we might not even admit that they're true about us until something happens and we're forced to face it. And then we're like, okay, that really was true about us, but about me. And the fact that like I'm just making this up. This isn't true about me, but I just need to feel needed, for example. And I have to publish a video every week or else my audience is going to be disappointed. Well, that's a belief you hold about yourself. They might not even notice, but you just want to make sure that they notice because it makes you feel more valuable or more loved or more wanted or desirable or whatever, right? And so a lot of the reasons why we discount this stuff goes into a lot deeper than to just like, oh yeah, I take care of myself. I sleep enough, right? Or I have a like whatever. So I think that's the reason why we can hear a lot of advice around this, and we all probably know what we should do, but we just don't do it because it would conflict with a deeply held belief that maybe we haven't even identified yet. And so that's definitely been part of the good part for me, is I feel like I understand myself better and some of the unhealthy beliefs I had that compelled me to have unhealthy habits when it comes around publishing and even motives for growing a business, and even reaching people and change lives can become selfish under certain conditions. So it's been really eye-opening for me, and I don't really know that there's a shortcut to that place. So there might be. That's like, I'm still too close to it to give you advice for that right now.
Yeah. Gotcha. Well, Tim, this has been a pleasure. It's been an honor to chat with you. Thank you so much for your time and being so forthright and honest about your own experiences as a creator, as an entrepreneur. This was awesome. But as we wrap up here, where can everybody find you? Where can everybody go to get in contact with you over at Video Creators?
Yeah, well, my team and I, we have a weekly podcast ourselves. You just search iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcast, just search for Video Creators, and we should pop up there. It's me and Len and Delana and I. When we talk more about next level growth strategies for established creators, people who are ready for that next level, more advanced strategy stuff. And so that's fun. Also go to videocreators.com and see what we're up to over there with, if you want a free guide on our process, the secret to growing your YouTube audience. It's a 6-step process we outline in a free guide over there you can download, and you get that at videocreators.com.
Thank you so much, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Tim Schmoyer for joining me on this episode of the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky. I've got a few quick things for all of you before you go. First of all, find the show notes for this episode with Tim and previous ones over at videocraftshow.com. And second, if you're a content creator that struggles to organize scripture ideas, got a resource for you. Just download a copy of our free script template. It can help you structure your videos and save you hours of time from filming in the process. To get it, all you have to do is go to videocraftshow.com, or if you're watching on YouTube, find the link in the description below and just subscribe to our email list. It'll get delivered straight to your inbox right after you sign up. And third, if you're enjoying the show, make sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We are always trying to make the show better for listeners and viewers like you, so your feedback, both good and bad, helps us improve. Finally, if you're watching the show on YouTube, make sure to hit the like button. It helps us with the YouTube algorithm and gets this show in front of more creators just like you. Leave us a comment too. We read every last one. And don't forget to subscribe as well if you haven't already. Thanks as always to my team for helping me produce the show. Nikki Vicente, Rexa Stanislaw, Shara Texon, Choco Rucam, Paulo Lopez, and the rest of the crew over at Video Husky. If you want your videos edited just like this, then visit videohusky.com to learn more. We'll see you next week on another episode of the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky.